The midnight deep dive video about the release of the next expansion has gone live. We have gotten a few more infos about the upcoming expansion, which it is always a reminder, since normally if you were to hear right now about the next expansion, you would be thinking about 6 months from now, 8 months from now, a long while before we actually get to care about any of this. Remember, The War Within is going to be an 18 months long expansion. So it was released in August of 2024. The next expansion is coming out in February of 2026, very late February, at the very latest, very early March. So these things will be relevant earlier than what we would normally expect. What we're going over for today is the revealed dungeon rotation for Mythic Plus in Midnight Season 1. Now, first, we have the confirmation of what has been going down for quite a few seasons now, which is releasing not all of the expansion dungeons all at once. We will have 4 midnight dungeons and 4 old dungeons to make the pool of Mythic Plus. We don't know too much, of course, about the midnight dungeons, so we have Magister's Terrace, the reworked Magister's Terrace, Mizara Caverns, Nexus Point Zenas, and Windrunner Spire. Fine, we have, no idea how these dungeons are going to look. What we are interested, of course, is which dungeons are going to be returning in the Mythic Plus pool, and also whether or not we have the easy version, so a dungeon already existing when Mythic Plus was live, so they already had, for example, the mob count, the mob and boss mechanics to be fitting for Mythic Plus, so we are talking about Legion, Shadowlands, or Dragonflight, or if it's an older dungeon. So this one would require essentially a full overhaul of mobs, the amount of mobs, the trash count, the boss mechanics to be fitting for Mythic Plus. Now, as per the dungeons in the alpha, as part of the Mythic Plus rotation pool, we have a 50-50 split. We have 2 dungeons returning, already existing from Mythic Plus seasons, and 2 brand new dungeons to join Mythic Plus. So the 2 returning dungeons we already had in Mythic Plus are one, I think I can say confidently, a fan favorite from Dragonflight, which is Algetar Academy. It was one of the more completed, more run higher completed in terms of level keys, so generally speaking considered easier than other dungeons, Algetar Academy. I'm pretty sure it will trigger some players' PTSD from the early days of Dragonflight, when the 3 boss of Algetar Academy was quite the pug killer, but the dungeon as a whole, overall, was considered quite the good one in Dragonflight. Who was not considered a good one whatsoever was the other returning Mythic Plus dungeon, which is from Legion, because this one is the seat of the Triumvirate. So the reason why this dungeon was known to be a disaster back in Legion, alongside its brother, the Cathedral of Eternal Night, was because, for those who don't remember, or those who didn't even play back in Legion, Mythic Plus was a last-minute, last-second idea. Pretty much someone came up with the idea of greater rifts, or rifts in general, from Diablo 3, and thought about porting them in WoW. And the closest thing they had in mind was to add them to dungeons. What if we create a system where dungeons continuously scale in difficulty endlessly, and you have to continue to keep going higher and higher against a timer? That's how the Rift system worked in Diablo. Now the problem is that back then this was completely unbalanced. None of the mobs, the trash pack, the pull count, even the boss mechanics back in Legion were balanced with this kind of endless scaling in mind. There were plenty of one-shot mechanics, there were plenty ways, of course, for smart players to abuse the AI of trash mobs. For example, there was no safeguard for trash mobs against kiting. You could have the tank jump in, use his defensive for 10 seconds to soak up all the damage, and then start running away for like 30 seconds, keep running backwards, and the rest of the DPS just kill the rest of the pack, because all of the casters, all of the melees were just chasing the tank. There was also barely anything about chain stunning, chain CCing, constantly stopping enemies from casting, so the mechanic of the dungeon themselves weren't well thought out to match with the new system of Mythic Plus. So what Blizzard thought about into the expansion once they realized what was the problem with Mythic Plus is that they also designed and released 2 dungeons, one in the patch of Tumbor Sargeras Cathedral and one in the patch of Argus, the seat of the Triumvirate, to be essentially what they thought would have been modern Mythic Plus. So trash mobs actually adjusted to work in an endless scaling environment, bosses also adjusted for that, and the result, at least back in Legion, was a disaster. Those 2 dungeons were far harder than any of the other Legion dungeons. They were also run much less than any of the other dungeons. They have also, up to this point, never been brought back in Mythic Plus rotations, right? If you go back to Legion, we have had Black Crook Hold, we have had Dark Heart Ticket, we have had Halls of Valor, we have had Neltarion's Lair, at one point or the other all brought back in Mythic Plus rotations, not these 2 dungeons. So now we have the news that this dungeon is coming back in the Mythic Plus rotation. So definitely, even though technically it was released during Mythic Plus season, we are talking about at this point like 8 years ago. So there is definitely some updating to be doing about this dungeon. It will be a good social experiment to see the way players will react to this dungeon compared to how they reacted the first time they got into this dungeon back in Legion. Back then it seemed horribly overcomplicated compared to the other dungeons. Maybe now that we have gotten used to plenty of other pretty tough Mythic Plus dungeon, it will seem just fine, nothing out of the ordinary perhaps. However, what we really can't know about how we will feel about these dungeons are the remaining 2, which have never been part of a Mythic Plus rotation. One is from Warlords, one is Skyreach. Skyreach is a pretty cool dungeon. It seems, at least by playing it on a short end in terms of speed of the dungeon, despite having four bosses. We will see how this dungeon will turn out once it is elevated to be a Mythic Plus dungeon, so many of the mechanics that were pretty much worthless back then, you could just ignore them. Of course, as you keep raising up the key level, they will become more and more deadly. What is even more curious and interesting though will be the last dungeon supposedly being part of the Mythic Plus Dungeon Pool, because we have to go back all the way to Wrath of the Lich King, because the Pit of Sauron is coming back as part of the Mythic Plus Dungeon Pool, or rather is coming for the first time to be part of the Mythic Plus Dungeon Pool. Now this should be a proper quick dungeon. It's only a 3 boss dungeon. Now this seemingly is one of the quickest dungeons. It already was back then, but if you update it to Mythic Plus, you only have 3 bosses. There is very little trash to be done, especially between the second and the last boss, where you have to do the gauntlet with the icicles falling down in the cavern. Obviously it has been updated for Mythic Plus, so maybe they are adding a 4th boss, maybe they are swarming the entire place with trash mobs, but at least going by how it was back then or how it currently is, if you do it while leveling or while time walking, it definitely does seem like one of the fastest of the dungeons in the pool. Definitely still a positive to have it as part of the dungeon pool, since it's a new one. It's one of the dungeons we haven't seen before, we haven't gotten yet in Mythic Plus, so still better than having another recycled dungeon join the ranks of the Mythic Plus pool of available dungeons. So this is what has been seen now that the alpha has gone live, is playable, and we have gotten more news about the alpha of the new expansion. As I said, slightly more relevant nowadays, since the gap from this season 3 to the beginning of the next expansion won't be 8, 10, even the old days of 12 to 14 month wait for a new expansion, but it's only gonna be 6 months, and we have already gone by 2 of them, so there is only 4 months left for the expansion. So it's closer than usual. Whenever we used to get these kind of news, we would be further back on the line from when we would have had to deal with all of these additions. Now we are definitely closer. So For today, on this Wednesday, this was the announcement related to what's gonna come down in Mythic Plus, at least supposedly next season. Now, with this out of the way on this Wednesday, it is now time to leave each other. We're starting the goodbyes as usual by thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with, of course, everyone else who has been supporting completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with this being said, thank you guys for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, my nice and timely dog barking concert as we start making our videos. It's always well received.